parliament seats, how do you navigate through the surface level politics to still be an effective legislator and representative of your constituents?
Good evening from Indonesia. Good morning for everyone, and maybe good afternoon for the others. Thank you, Maria, for asking me and inviting us to discuss about something important like this. For us in Indonesia, we are believing that if we talk about the democracy, there will be different kinds of opinions, arguments, and sometimes of ideology or something. So we have to prepare about how we can handle that. In our constituency, so we have to explain it to the people, how the democracy works, how that we can take the consensus or something like that, because in Indonesia, we have to prioritize for the parliament to take the deliberate for consensus. But even though we know that it is more easier to speak about that than more difficult about how to explain to the consequences, so we have to state our position, other position, and how we can reach the consensus like that. Sometimes we can't make the consensus, sometimes we can make the consensus. So we have to, we have decided that there are some effort that we have to do. So many stakeholders have to get their opinions for a specific item, something like that. So we can take the other opinion about that, and we can discuss and debate it in Parliament. So the constituents might understand about that, and we still have to have the voters' education or political education for the constituents, so they can understand. But because if they don't understand, they will think about that it is A side versus B sides and some kind of the war or something like that. So it can be fighting in the community. We understand that in the parliament, because they have the different kinds of thought, argument, position. We can understand as a parliamentarian, but the people, we have to teach them so they can understand about that. The other that we make, we have the different, we have the one, some of try to more open for the parliament, and it is more helpful for us to bridge the misunderstand about what the parliament debating, because some people think that when we debating it is the dividing between the opposition and coalition. Sometimes we are debating to make the consensus. They don't really understand about that. So the community, they have to fight it and something like that. So we have to take more open. Even though I was in parliament since 2009, but I am joining the Open Parliament team is only 2019. It's 3 years ago. So we have the so many systems. Thanks to COVID, I think this blessing in disguise that so we more open for the debating in the parliament. The people can see live stream. They can connect to the process in the parliament with the social media. The institution parliament itself, the person in the parliament, the member of parliament, or the institution just fraction. We have the 9 fraction in our House of Representatives. So they have the we have to think about that more and more open. So and in our second amendment of the how to develop the regulation law of the developing regulation, we have underlined that you have that you sorry that you have to put so many forum for the people to give the insight for the bill that we still debating. There have been giving political education is the underline of this is part of our program in the our law, political party law of Indonesia, that each political party should give the political education, and our political party, Prosperous Justice Party, give more understanding for the people to more understand about the process, because we believe that if the people understand about the process, so they will more have the mature habit of democracy. I think something like that, Maria.
Thank you, Honorable Leah Hanifa. I think it was really, really interesting of your insights to sort of make constituents understand the process, understand the internal debates that you have, and sort of make them own that there are MPs that have to decide, and in a way you are fighting against keeping your position, but then also bridging and making an agreement. And I think it's interesting that the way out for that, for you and for your legislative group, is to sort of put your foundations on openness, and so making them understand and be more open to who the MPs are and what the internal debates are, and sort of breaking that us them inside and outside, and make it a big effort to create that conversation with the constituents. I really I'm interested, and I foresee that that is a very strong effort that you have to make, being Indonesia a very populous country, and to comply with that and with your or with the objectives that you have set, it must be at least challenging. So thank you very much for now. And now we'll go to Irina Prutse, a very old friend from this debate on open parliament. Irina, you come from Georgia, and I guess these times in Georgia must be really, really challenging because of where you're located geographically in the world. And if I know you from many years, I gather that you must be thinking of playing a key role, although you're not in parliament anymore. And I want to sort of pick your head into what you're thinking and what you think the different roles can be played in Georgia today, and specifically what you're doing, or what you're talking, what you're seeing with the different stakeholders to sort of help in the situation. And that's a really, really polarized situation that you are at today, I'm sure, and maybe we can talk about that. That's my first question. And if we have time for a second one, we'll go ahead with a second one and in another round.
Hello. I'm very happy and honored to be provided an opportunity to speak on the open panel. Yes, indeed, Maria, we all live in very polarized societies nowadays, and especially in our region. And pretty often politicians are part or even reason of this polarization, willingly or not. In some cases, they even create the polarization for their political aims. Those who want to bridge the divide are often captives of the situation and lacking the power to influence. I don't think that former MPs or any other external persons can play key role in bridging the divide if there is no political will among the incumbent political forces and political groups, those who are at the moment in the parliament. If nobody is interested in the polarization, any external engagement is only formalistic. It can happen, but it will just be very superficial, and it will not lead to any substantive changes. Still, former MPs can help some MPs, especially freshmen, who are interested to be engaged in more thematic discussions, to work on the topics which are actual and relevant for the society. These former MPs who have some experience can help those MPs with the expertise, be it thematic expertise or procedural, and this way contribute to more issue-based discussions in the parliament. And whenever the debate moves to issue-based discussion, then the polarization starts. I have an example. There are several former MPs in Georgia, for example, who work with the parliament in the capacity of independent consultants or civil society representatives, and they help the members of parliament on various issues. One of the examples is my contribution at the moment. While being a member of parliament, I was working with my colleagues on the law on consumer rights, which was a very controversial law because it required transposition of a lot of EU directives, most of them with full compliance. And there was huge resistance from the side of businesses and business associations, and ambiguity from the side of state institutions. So it was pretty difficult to work on this law, but with a very wide and long stakeholder engagement process, it lasted for more than 3 years. We managed to adopt the law with a very wide support. So finally, everybody was happy, and now I continued to work with the member of parliament to monitor implementation of the law. And the member of parliament, which is a new member of parliament, is now engaging there were various stakeholders to develop the recommendations on the execution of the law. And I'm the one who is providing some expertise on the issue, and this way helping the members of parliament to work on the issue, which is of interest of the society, for the society, because for people it's very actual and relevant. The consumer's right concerns everybody, every citizen, this or other way. And it's good to see that MPs work on such issues. And it also builds the trust among the society towards the parliament and towards MPs. So this is just a small example of how former MPs can play the role, but I can't say that this role can be a key role. Key role is still among the acting parliamentarians and acting political groups, because only their true meaningful political will is necessary for the for real depolarization and good processes to start and take place.
Thank you, Irina. It's really interesting what you mentioned about sort of that sort of alliance between incumbents and former MPs, especially to bridge the old debates with the ones that will come, and that sort of possible alliance with thematic discussions as the one that you described on consumer rights. So I think there is an interesting also point there, and also on the procedural aspect of parliament, which takes a lot of time to new parliamentarians to learn, and that could also be a key point to advance, to help them advise on the debates. But as you say, if there's no political will, there's less that you can do as former MPs. Now we'll go to Gabriel Silva, an MP from Panama, and the question that, hello Gabriel, how are you? I have a question regarding the debate and the consensus that was created in the Parliament of Panama regarding the conflict of interest legislation, and so specifically, were they able to reach that consensus, given that Panama is a country where that is a really, really hot issue because of all the background that we know, and then which actions I think were the key ones that helped that piece of legislation to advance. So thank you very much for being here. So I'll give you the floor.
Thank you, Maria. I'm really happy to be here. It's really a pleasure to share my experience and hear the experience of other parliamentarians, and congratulate you and the organization for organizing this, because I think it's an amazing opportunity to learn from other parliamentarians and their job they're doing and the challenges that they're facing, which is very interesting because it's in several cases the same challenges I am facing in other parts of the world. Just to provide a little bit of background on why this proposal law, a conflict of interest law, was important for my country, I would like to share with you that in Panama, according to national polls, corruption is the #1 or the #2 most pressing issues for the population. We lose about $700 million a year in corruption. Maybe for some of your countries, that's not so much because they're big countries, but for Panama, that's a lot of money. And according to Transparency International, a corruption perception index, since 15 years ago, we've been losing in the rankings. We've been becoming more and more corrupt and losing in transparency. I'm currently I'm a member of parliament who is independent, but we have an independent caucus because we are 4 independents in parliament, and we decided to create a group. We're 71 members in parliament, and we're just 4 in the independent caucus. So we are obviously a minority. So approving such a law was a very, very difficult challenge, but it was possible. And I would like to share with you a little bit of the ideas of why do I think it was possible. But before that, to explain to you a little bit of what this conflict of interest law entails or contains. Just 5 key things. #1 is that all high-level positions in government, including parliamentarians, have to annually report possible conflict of interest, including parliamentarians, and that was obviously a difficult point to achieve in parliament. #2 is that it regulates public procurement to prevent campaign donors to get government contracts. Obviously a very challenging and difficult topic. #3 is that it prevents public servants from receiving any type of gifts to avoid corruption. #4, it regulates the revolving door issue, which I'm sure you know the concept of revolving door issue. And #5, that public servants can't earn 2 government salaries. Those are probably the five most important key aspects of this conflict of interest law. Now, how was consensus made? This was obviously not easy at all, but I think I can summarize this in five key aspects. Number one is that we have to consider the context of the country. And with the context, I mean citizen discontent. Citizens discontent with democracy. There's a very interesting ranking from the Barometer of the Americas, and they measure the citizens, what do they think about democracy in each of the countries in Latin America, and usually Panama is ranked amongst the worst. Panamanians don't believe in democracy anymore, so there's a big discontent with democracy, with the government, with parliament, and there's a nationwide cry against corruption. So the number one thing is that we have to consider the context of, I think politicians feel and see that people are not happy with the government and with traditional politics and want things to change, and are asking for changes, particularly in the area of corruption. And I think this wouldn't have been possible if there wasn't, if citizen pressure wouldn't have existed. And also because the media has helped or has aided by every day exposing corruption in social media, on traditional media. So there's a nationwide cry against corruption. That was probably the most important thing, because as you might know, many members of parliament, many politicians respond to pressure from the citizens. So that was key and essential to approving this law. Number two is that the proposal was very well written. It was very specific, very clear. We know areas of ambiguity. I think that helped a lot for the discussions, so that the members of parliament understand what specifically we were regulating, and that the norm wasn't going to exceed in certain cases. So that gave them a sense of clarity, which I think it was easier for the discussion. Nevertheless, even though it was very specific, number three, I would say that we had to have the capacity to be flexible and not achieve perfection. I think that at the end of the day, 80% of what we proposed was approved. So we had to cut a lot of articles, a lot of dispositions during the debates. We had to be flexible, even though it's not a perfect law, the one that we initially proposed. I think it's still an 80%, which is good. But we had to be flexible in understanding that sometimes it's more important to take one or two steps than no steps, or to go behind. Number four, I think it was crucial, the support from civil society organizations for several things, so that they could meet members of parliament, they could meet with the president of parliament, and we also validate with them several proposals during the discussion. Also, it was very important, the presence and the support from the media, from the interviews that they gave me and other members of parliament, where we would talk about this, and the exposure and coverage they were doing to the debates. So the citizens were knowing what was happening in parliament in regards to this topic. And finally, I think it was a matter of time. It took a lot of time, but we had to be patient. The law was proposed in 2019, so it took over 3 years to get it approved. It was sent to committees, to subcommittees. It was vetoed by the president. It was sent to different tables for discussion. It took a lot of time. There were many moments where I thought this was not going to get approved, and it was just going to be left behind and put it in a drawer. But eventually, by pressuring a lot in media and in parliament, it was achieved. I think that me and my caucus, every week, we stood up in parliament or went to the media and said, and pressured parliament to discuss the bill. We would say, this parliament hasn't approved a single anti-corruption law, and we've already been here for 3 years, for 2 years, for 1 year. We were saying this almost every week. So it came a moment where I think parliament as a whole felt a pressure to approve an anti-corruption law, and we finally achieved it. We have presented over 10 anti-corruption laws, so we were always pressuring on that. Like, we have presented over 10 anti-corruption laws, and none has been achieved till date. And I think that helped pressure parliament also into debating this project and approving it. Finally, also considering the context, it is important to mention that the president of Panama in campaign made a public promise to approve over 7 anti-corruption laws. And even though he hasn't presented even a single one to parliament, that's something we also constantly said in the media and in parliament, that this was a promise from the president in campaign. He hasn't presented the proposals. We have presented the proposals, and this is an opportunity for the president to comply with his campaign proposals. So I think that also helped the president sign. Initially, it was veto, but we fixed the veto, and then eventually he signed it. So I think we also pressured the president a little bit by tying this to his campaign proposals. Thank you very much once again for the opportunity to share this experience.
Gabriel, thank you very much for this story about how difficult it was to pass this piece of legislation in Panama. And I think there are really sort of highlight points of what you just mentioned. I think the first one is sort of the context in Panama, all the measurements that have Panama sort of at the bottom, but also that together with the cohort or the community that was created with the media, the civil society organizations, and also I'm sure you and some MPs as well, forcing so this issue to be debated and not sort of resigning on putting it forward, because it took some time. And I think these issues, the characteristic that they have is that nobody wants to push them alone, and they're not easy to be passed. And then one other thing, which is also true, and I think it's true for many issues that are presented before Parliament, it is that there's no perfection in the letter of the articles of a specific law. If you achieve an 80%, like you mentioned, I think, as you said, is good. And then you have opportunities to talk and create new policies from the executive, or create new bills that could, in a way, rectify or make that law a better one. So I think that the first veto of the president was overruled in a way by the force that you put together. So it's really, really interesting example, that one that I will use, I mind you. So now, given that the MP from Jamaica is not coming, it seems, right, Natalie?
Yes, unfortunately, she won't be able to make it. But thank you.
It's okay. So Sapphire Longmore won't be here, but what we'll do is we'll open the floor for questions. And the way we will be able to do it is you can raise the hand, and I'll see the hand raised in the here in the app, and I'll call your name, so you can ask the question. Please consider more questions than comments, if that is fine with you, and then who the question is for, unless it's for everyone in the panel. Thank you very much. So I'll see now. Otherwise, if it takes a little bit of time, I'll ask my own question while you prepare yourselves for your own. I don't see any hand, so I'll jump right into my own question. And this is a very, I think, interesting one, which is what effects does ideological diversity have on a polarized parliament? If you have that experience in your own country, please, this is a question for everyone. So if you can, please raise your hand. Please take the floor. And then I'll see, after you answer that, I see Olga, who wants to ask a question. So I'll give her the floor when you are done answering. I'll ask you, Gabriel, can you answer that?
Yeah, I don't think I'm the best to answer the question, because Panama's parliament has well, maybe some of the parliaments here share the same situation, but in Panama, politics doesn't have very clear ideologies. So we don't have like the right party, left-wing party. So it's more of a pragmatic approach to politics. So we don't really have ideological discussions in Parliament. On that, I think in some ways unfortunate, because even though we don't have ideological discussions in Parliament, there's a lot of consensus in the proposals, and we are, and the level of the debates are not about ideologies, but sometimes are about the exchanges that can be done in Parliament between parliamentarians to get those votes. So we're missing, actually, in Panama, I think, those ideologies in Congress. We're missing those. We need more representation of different ideologies in Congress, because what we see is a lot of pragmatism, and pragmatism is good, is fine, but when it reaches a level where there is no values, ideology, or vision behind it, and when considering the corruption context in Panama, that pragmatism can transform into corruption, can transform into exchanges. So in order to get a vote, something approved in Parliament, another member of Parliament is not thinking about its ideology, but of what can I get in exchange for my community, for my votes, or for whatever. So I think that would be one part of the answer. The other part of the answer is there are obviously some ideologies that are very clear in Parliament, and topics where there is a strong division and consistency. And I would probably say LGTB rights in Parliament. That's something where I probably disagree with many of my colleagues. I am probably one or a few members of Parliament who has supported LGBT rights in Parliament. So there are differences of ideology there in Parliament. I think Panama is a very conservative country, and parliamentarians, some of them are very conservative. And that has been quite a challenge. And nevertheless, we also, considering the lessons that I learned from this project, we managed to approve recently a sexual education law, which I proposed. And as you can imagine, discussing this in a very conservative context can be a challenge. But we managed to get that consensus, basically with the same lessons that I share with you with the conflict of interest law. You know, not trying to achieve perfection, getting involved with civil society, just considering the national context, where every day in Panama, over 30 women that are less than 18 years old get pregnant. So it is interesting that the lessons that happen with the conflict of interest law, approving such a controversial law in Congress, can apply as well to this sexual education law, where certain divides in ideology, in the ideological spectrum, can be seen in Parliament. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It's really interesting. We'll go to Mrs. Hanifa, and then we'll go to Irina, and after that we'll give the floor to Olga.
Okay, thank you, Maria. In Indonesia, we have the national principle of Pancasila. We are agreed that we are the religious people in Indonesia. So the different people in Indonesia have to think thought based on the religious ideology or other values that are acknowledged by the nation. So sometimes we have the debating about the law that actually the difference is how to implement it, how to manage it for some issues. We have and we have passed a law about the eradication of sexual violence. The law proposed by some groups. The other faction, we name the political party groups in parliament is faction. Some faction thought that it could be proposed as a law because there are some articles that need to get more or to correct based on their value. And there are so many things to discuss, just like how to prevent the youngs from the violence, crime, something like that in education, in the school or university, something like that. The difference is how they have to value it. And we have been debating so much about that. And the other, there are some factions agree to pass the law, and the other, my political party didn't agree about to pass the law, because we think that there are base of the crime law that we didn't have the amend it. It's the base that we have to make it first. So sometimes that we debating so many things about that, and then we have to vote, and the law still passed. The community have the different of the value they have. They debating and discussing, and then just like Gabriel told us that sometimes we have to decrease our target for the passing law. Yeah, 80% or 70% is okay, because we need to have the law. It is better than we don't have something like that. So we have to discuss about that. And Maria, in Indonesia, we have debated the law, because we have different systems. So the law can proposed by the government, or can proposed by the parliament. Sometimes we are in the parliament have the consensus, and we have different side with the government. So the polarization is not between the member of parliament only, sometimes between the parliament and the government. And the people outside the parliament sometimes have the other, they have their own thought. So what I said before, that we have to get more people well educated about the process, so they can understand that we are not just fight in the committee, but we are thinking about just like helicopter view about the countries and how can implement this law. Is it important for them or not, or something like that. So it is some kind of we have to really educate the people so they can understand. So because we have to learn from the past presidential election 2009. The people is divided into two blocks, and it is uh, 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 it is still divided until now, because we have two candidates for the presidency, and the supporters are divided, and almost in every issues they always divide something like that. So we have to bridging the dividing, so they can more understand about the process. It's not about it that is passed. It is proposed because of the A candidate, so B candidate is have to deny it and something like that. Sometimes we have the ideological, but the others are more practical or pragmatic, just like Andrew told us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's really interesting what you say, that a specific law or bill is not interesting just because what's presented by an A candidate or a B candidate. You have to look behind it to see what is there. And I think that is true in many parliaments in the world, where, like you're saying, there's a divide to a battle between two groups. And then in the end, you don't know what ideology they have. It's only the battle between those two groups. Irina, thank you for answering this question in beforehand.
It's amazing to see how similar the situations can be in the countries across the ocean. the context is so similar. When I listen to my colleagues, I see that there are more similarities than differences. In Georgia as well, we have more debates on the positions like power game rather than the ideological debates than differences. And when I listened to Gabriel Silva, I went to the same process when trying to push through the code of ethics of the member of parliament. And it took me, I don't know, years and a lot of nerves to manage to convince my colleagues to adopt the code of ethics. Finally, I was successful with my like-minded people. And I have the same, tactics as you mentioned. What is important, in fact, what was very specific that in this case, majority and opposition were united in resistance. So it was some kind, this building the bridges case when they were all united in the resistance against the code of ethics. And what Honorary Silva said, I could add some few points on the tactics or strategies. One is, it's very good to mention that showing high relevance for the society is a key, because politicians tend to support the cause if they clearly see that it brings public approval. You need also to find resistance point, the minimum terms for that negotiate they are willing to accept, because pretty often the resistance is very irrational and superficial. And if you communicate very well the resistance points, and if there is substantial discussions, it helps reaching the consensus, because people realize that their resistance is not based on real issues. It's more irrational fear to some issues that they don't really understand. It's very helpful to mobilize supporters in the parliament and from outside as well, and to give them floor to support the case. And also it's very important to have in mind that a lot of time and patience is required in such cases. And besides the code of ethics, which is exactly the same as the law on conflict of interest, I had exactly the same experience with the legislative amendments on the sexual intimidation. So again, I see how similar the situations are in different countries, and the strategies can be absolutely the same.
Thank you very much, Irina. Yes, it's really interesting to see that everything in every country, we're not inventing the wheel. It already happens. And so I think it's interesting to share the strategies that you individually have undertaken, and that some of those efforts can be sort of ideas to other contexts. Now we have Olga. Sorry for making you wait because of the answers of the other questions. Hola, Olga, how are you?
Muy bien, gracias. No worries. Very happy to be here and to learn from the experiences of Ledia and Irina. I know very well the experiences in Panama, and Gabriel is a great ally for us in the civil society organizations that work and fight for transparency. My question is from a general point of view regarding how worrisome it is for the whole world to see this polarization that is affecting democracy to its core. One of the main roles of parliaments is to be the organ or the power that carries the most representation of the electorate. I would like to hear from the people in the panel what they think could be the use of parliament in actually closing that breach, that divide. What could be, no, I mean, we're always diagnosing and looking at the negative parts, but is there a particular way or an experience in which we could rely on parliament to start closing that gap, in the sense of how people feel represented or unrepresented by parliament, and how polarization is creating a democratic governance crisis, even in very traditional and stable democracies in the world, as, for example, is happening in England, in the UK, in the last 48 hours. It's very worrisome. And I would like to know if looking more towards the solution or the bridges of how to close this gap, because I do feel that democracy is in danger. In my country, it is. I think Gabriel's assessment of it was dead on. So thank you. I'm trying to make the question without sounding that I'm making a comment, because it's truly a question. I would like to hear solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga. So your question is, given the worry that there is in the world of this polarization and negativity, is Parliament able to or has the armor to bridge that divide in the different societies, right? So if you're okay, I'll give the floor to Irina first, then to Lydia, and then to Gabriel.
Yes, I think one of the ways to address or tackle the polarization is having communication and discussion over the issues. And the parliament exactly is the place where these discussions and communications between different groups can happen. But for these, parliaments need to be open and transparent. Because if the parliament is a very closed institution, there is no trust toward the parliament, and then it does not really play a positive role in the polarization. It can even play a negative role. So that's why it is very important to work a lot with making parliaments very open institutions and helping them to play this role of bridging the divides, and also engaging more people in their work. Because through engaging society in the parliamentary work, in the discussions in the parliament, this trust is built. So yes, theoretically, the members of parliament, the parliament can play very positive role in the polarization, but it requires a lot of work and firstly, the will among the politicians.
Thank you, Irina. Lydia, please.
Yes, thank you. I just want to add something, that it is difficult for us to balance that in democracy. We have so many different arguments, thoughts about some things. But the difference, it's not automatically divide you to the two and make the polarization. The balancing for understanding about this is not easy for the people outside the parliament. For us in the parliament, it's more easier to understand about how to balance it. So in Indonesia, we have some effort to try to reduce the polarization. It's like we are more open, more inclusive and participative in policy making process, and we try to strengthening our public participation process with the we have the House of Aspiration, the office in the constituency, so the people can send their thought, their think about some items, some themes that we are debate in parliament. We have also make some inviting the stakeholders of the teams to present what they thought about that. Also, we have the we think that the process is also key in giving Parliament the legitimacy in determining policies which directly affect the life of people. Public participation, engagement, and empowering civic space is one of the most important for us to ensuring the inclusion of the voices of public, and it also provides input, data, and etc. for the piece we need to present. And we try to more ensure that with the all voice, we provide various channels online and offline. We also have multiple online platform for our website for the process of the law making process. Which one the law is still debating, which one is passed or denied to the process and something like that. So for the case of just 2 months ago, we're debating about amendment of the educational system in Indonesia. So it is the proposed by the government, but the process is not really satisfy the people. So there are so many debating, arguing to deny that law, that bill which proposed with the government. So we in the Parliament decided that we will pending this draft to discuss in the Parliament until the government can explain, can communicate more with the people who are stakeholder of the issue. So it is not easy, but we're still working on it, and we hope that we can reach the better condition for the process, something like this.
Thank you, Hanifa. I'll give the floor to Gabriel now.
Thank you. I think it's an amazing question, and it's very interesting, and I think a little bit difficult to answer in the Panamanian context, because I think it really depends on how we define polarization. I don't know if Olga will agree with me, and probably we'll have a conversation offline after this, but if we define polarization of having someone in here and another person here, and they are not meeting in the middle, then I think Panama maybe needs a little bit more of polarization. Maybe the term is not correct. Maybe the term that I should say is opposition, because as I mentioned before, what we see in Parliament in Panama currently is that there's little to no opposition, because many members of Parliament vote and have their postures depending on what benefits them or their communities personally. So I think actually we would benefit in elevating the discussion and having different ideologies in Parliament, so that it's a discussion about ideas and policies and visions of the country, and not on what benefits me personally or my community. So we're missing that ideology called battle or discussion, which in some way can be beneficial for a democracy. However, if we define polarization as going to the extremes, yes, we do have that also in Panama. Like we have politicians that go to the extremes. We have, and sometimes it's not just one politician, but a group of politicians, or even the posture of a political party. And if what we want to battle is that politicians going to the extremes, then I think we should have a possible solution, and obviously this is an easy way out, but is that we have to get more politicians that are in the middle, and in order to do, and that and not only in the middle, but once again that they can't be both, because sometimes you have politicians that are in the middle, but in exchanges they will change their vote or their posture. So we need more consistent politicians in the middle that are loyal to their ideas, outspoken to their ideas, and by having more people in the middle, maybe they will do a balance against those that are in the extremes, you know? So yeah, I think it's the easy way out, just saying that we need more people that are consistent with their ideologies and more located in the middle in order for the polarization to be a little bit reduced with time and with discussions.
Okay, thank you, Gabriel. So if you're okay, we don't have another question. So what we'll do is I'll give you the highlights of my takeaways of this conversation, and then I'll ask you three to give like a 4-word sentence of your highlights of this conversation, if that's okay. Yes? Okay, so I think for me, what became clear by what you three said today is that there needs to be conditions for bridging the divide, or any divide, like Gabriel was saying, a divide on interests, personal interests versus public interest, or a divide, an ideological divide, or a conservative divide, or like Hanifa was saying, a religious divide. And those conditions, usually, Irina was saying, they're not necessarily deep. Sometimes they're irrational, sometimes they're not based on evidence. So there needs to be sort of the basic condition needs to be openness. And with that, like Hanifa was saying, we need to let the public, and as a big sort of stakeholder, know what is happening in the parliament, know who the parliamentarians are, what their ideas are, and they have to understand the process, and then they're inside, in a way they own a little bit what is happening, because it's their interests too that are being defended. And like Olga was saying earlier in her question, this is the most representative institution, the institution that theoretically represents the most of our societies. So Hanifa mentioned it earlier too, there needs to be inclusion of those voices in the debates, in the bills that representatives bring, and that debate needs to have sort of a little bit of evidence, not so much because you say apples, I say oranges, and that should reflect also civic space, LGBT rights, and especially of the ones that are of the portions of society that are not well heard. Then and this all is only a condition. This only is a condition for trust of our societies in the institution that we're talking about. With that trust, then we have a get-go, and then we have an opportunity to build and to cross those bridges, and to, like we always say, start that knitting from one side to the other. So that's my takeaway. If I can give you the voice, Gabriel, then I'll give you Hanifa and then Irina, and then we'll finish.
Thank you. Once again, thank you for the opportunity. This has been amazing, and I invite you guys to organize it more often. I would love to just go online to listen to other parliamentarians speak about these issues, and their experience is truly an enriching experience. So I think that the main takeaway for me was just a little bit of what Irina mentioned. You know, first realizing that the same issues that I face here in Parliament as a minority in Congress are issues that other members of Parliament are facing worldwide. And in certain way, it gives me comfort to know that the same issues that I have here, others have it. And also that the same strategies and solutions and tactics that I've been using are the ones that others have been using. And as you mentioned, you know, not reinventing the wheel because it's something that I think it exists now, it has existed in the past, and will probably exist in the future. maybe with certain different variables because the parliaments and government structures are different, but essentially politics certainly shares different similar characteristics nationwide. Additionally, another key takeaway I would say is that the importance of elevating the discussion in Parliament, having more moderate views in Parliament, and presenting and having the courage to speak out when that polarization is happening in Congress, because that moderate view can be and usually is necessary in order to achieve that consensus or in order to achieve that middle ground, which I think sometimes it's the most important thing in a democracy. So thank you once again, and it's been a pleasure to share with you.
Yeah, this is my turn. Thank you for managing this conversation discussion about this. It's really interesting for us to learn more about how other parliaments are handling something issues just like this. I from my takeout first is the parliament institution itself have to be more open and consistent open for the process. The second is the member of parliament itself should more open to the constituency, so the constituent can understand about the process, so they more mature in democracy. The third is we have to more learn about and more wise about how we can analyze how people react about the law or the policy that we discussed. Because sometimes, just like Irina said, that it's not ideological. It's only for the only for just like the pragmatic, but they drive to the ideological something like that. It's only pragmatic, but some people think that it's ideological. So we have to more have the to more understand about how to analyze the people react about that. And I think that the last is how the much more organization make some discussion like this. We have worries about polarization, but we still have to work and to endorsing people that we have different thoughts, different ideas. It's okay for democracy, but not to driven to the polarization. So we have to I think that there are so many organizations have to socialize and something like this, so the people can more communicate about the different ideas and thought like this in the wise way, and we still have understand what they want. We respect them, and we can think about how to make the consensus about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Irina, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, I will be very quick. Just one sentence. I think it's important to generate public demand, to listen, to communicate, and to be persistent. And one point we have missed in this discussion is gender equality in parliament. As more the gender equality you have in parliament, the less the polarization is. It's my personal observation, and I think it's very important point when we speak about this issue.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you to the three of you. Thank you, Parlamericas. Thank you, NDI. Thank you, WFD. We're good to go.